If a book is good, I think it challenges what we already believe in. I think that it kind of quarrels with the ideas that we already have. If it's fiction, nonfiction, it doesn't really matter. I feel like if it's a good story and if it's a good compelling argument, lots of things can happen. So that is the topic of the video that I want to explore today. I want to talk about books that changed the way I think. These aren't necessarily going to be the most profound novels. These aren't going to necessarily be philosophical, but these are books that I had ideas about things, and these kind of shifted and changed that dialogue that I had within myself. So let's get into the books, baby. Oh, and we can have a moment for the shirt. Sound off. This video was all spawned because I am currently reading The Observable Universe by Heather McAulden. I immediately knew that I was going to like this because this is a style of memoir that I haven't necessarily encountered. What sets this apart for me is that it's taking two things that I'm very interested to learn about, which is the AIDS epidemic and somebody who was incredibly affected by it. Both of McAulden's parents passed from the disease, and the rise of the internet, the rise of virality. And what McAulden is doing is tying those two things together and kind of incorporating their parallels to weave a narrative and the story of her life. This changed the way that I look at memoirs, and I know that there's a lot of very crafty memoirs. I know that there's so many different ways that people have played with syntax and form and verse in memoirs, and those are all applaudable and wonderful, but this has been one of the most successful ones that I've seen. It doesn't feel gratuitous, and it feels very educational and immersive in its experience, so I love it. The second book that I want to talk about, and this one feels very, very pertinent because we are reading The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat in my Patreon book club. Check it out if you would like to. That is by the author Oliver Sacks, Anthropologist on Mars. This novel changed the way that I look at scientific texts. It doesn't have to be scary, it doesn't have to be daunting. This novel carried its tune throughout, and it didn't lose its reader. If anything, you became much more kind of aggressive and excited in the way that you read this because you wanted to find out what Sacks' take on the neurological condition he was explaining was. If you don't know who Oliver Sacks is, he is a neuroscientist, neurologist who rose to prominence documenting these very rare or strange neurological disorders that people were grappling with in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. A lot of the cases that we know today that are very prolific, and we've kind of learned to understand a lot of them, Sacks was kind of one of the first people to openly talk about them and diagnose them and make them much more comprehensible to the average person who wasn't encountering them often. So this novel follows about 7 to 8 to kind of like 9 of those neurological instances. What I loved about this was that I wasn't going in feeling like it was going to be a complicated maze, trying to understand what was going on. There weren't so many footnotes that I was like, okay, okay, this was discovered in that and that and that. No. It told like a story. It told like you were just sitting in the doctor's office with these patients and you were understanding how their mind worked alongside Sacks as he was trying to understand and diagnose these individuals. Absolutely changed the way that I look at scientific texts. And speaking of mind, now is the time that I want to talk about the lovely, 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 lovely people behind Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a drink like no other. I am not a really big drink type of person. I don't like things that I'm putting into my body if I don't know where they're coming from. But Magic Mind is something that I have actually been using for years. I started using this when I was doing shows. My artistic director gave this to me before I went out and did the show, and I absolutely crushed it. So what is Magic Mind? Magic Mind is a mental performance shot. It helps to reduce stress, boost productivity, and kind of reduce that brain fog that you might feel throughout the day. I personally am a massive napper. I feel like my life only begins after I've taken my midday nap. But progressively, as I use Magic Mind more and more, I felt like my napping wasn't as mandatory in my life. Felt like my sleeping has changed. I never used to be a morning person. Now I am actually waking up at 8:30 in the morning, which is very, very impressive for me. What has been really fun has been doing the 7-day challenge, taking Magic Mind for 7 days, and seeing how it boosts the productivity and the lessened fogginess in my day-to-day life. And it absolutely has kind of like a looser, sustained release, and you feel the effects as you're going and as you're kind of boosting yourself throughout. It's not just me that's saying that it's good. It's been doctor verified, and there's been over 200 scientific tests conducted to make sure that this is as good as it gets. The people in Magic Mind are so confident in their product that they have offered a 100% 100-day money-back guarantee. They ship in over 65 countries, and now they are available in Sprouts Central Market in Erewhon. If it's in Erewhon, you know it's good. So if you are interested in Magic Mind, which I hope you are, you can use the code in my bio, AnnaWJ20, to get up to 40% off your first subscription for the first 10 days. And I've got my mom onto this. So if my mom is on this, you know I stand by it, because my mom is one of my favorite people in the world, and I would not lead her astray. So thank you so much to Magic Mind. Let's go. Okay, so the next book that I want to talk about is the $12 million Stuffed Shark. This book was so life-changing for me in a sense of how I look at the contemporary art world. I am someone who lives in New York City. I love looking at art. I find myself going to the museums in my downtime. And to know kind of the fallacy of the art world now, dare I say it, is such an eye-opening experience. This book talks about kind of the politics and the marketing strategies behind a lot of contemporary artists. Now, we're not talking about artists that were from the 50s, 60s, even 70s. Contemporary artists is kind of 70s forward, and it's looking at a lot of these artists that, you know, tape a banana to the wall and why they are so profitable. I think it's such an interesting book. I would say that I think this was published in early 2000s. I would love an updated version to see how inflated and insane some of the recent artworks have gone for. I would love to see the author's take on that, but this is a really deep dive into that world. It does get a little monotonous at times, I will say that, but if you're looking for the structure of how galleries and kind of sponsors basically of these people come to be, it's so interesting to look into that world. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I also have Susan Sontag's Regarding the Pain of Others. Again, looking into the art world and the effects of art on the everyday person. This novel is talking more about kind of graphic artwork, photographs, even writings, paintings, things that shocked the world and sent these vibrations of emotion, how grief and frustration can be translated through artworks, through a picture, and be interpreted in so many different ways. These are amazing art books. I think for me, as somebody who just kind of gawks at art, it's really interesting to have a firmer grasp on that world and have a conversation about it. So these books really changed the way I think about that world. Okay, girl, listen, we gotta do it. We gotta do it. I don't care, we gotta do it. The Devil in the White City. Now, you're probably like, how did that change the way you think? So many people read that book. You're not alone in digesting and understanding that book. But let me tell you something. This was the first book that I read over 3 times. This is the most reread book in my library. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This book changed the way that I looked at nonfiction. I remember listening to this on audiobook as a child in my parents' car driving down to Florida. I'm from New York. From New York to Florida and listening to this on audiobook. And I remember being absolutely enraptured and fascinated. And who was gonna tell a, I don't know, 7 or 8-year-old girl that you could be so transfixed by a story that was true? This book did it for me. This book has continued to do it for me. I love Larson. I love The Splendid and the Vile. I love In the Garden of the Beasts, Devil in the White City. I read Dead Wake as well, which is, I would say, probably my second favorite book of his. Really fantastic to read. It's about the sinking of the Lusitania. Sorry, I've had a lot of stimulation today and I can't wrap words around my mouth. This author and this book has continued to make me realize how important true stories can be, and how, again, similar to Oliver Sacks, an anthropologist on Mars, how these true stories don't have to be daunting, and how you can find something that educates and titillates you even when it's all fact-based. I love this. I love, 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 love this. Just to kind of go off of fact and history, we have A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich. Now, I'm not saying that this is the definitive book to tell you about history. I'm not saying that this is the most important historical book to ever lay in my hands. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that this worked for me. This is a book that changed the way that I look at history books. I do like history. I like it a lot. I'll put on the History Channel. I'll put on Antiques Roadshow, baby, okay? I love an antique story.
It's worth about $400,000. You okay?
Okay. But sometimes I'm not reaching for it. Even historical fiction, if it's set within a certain time frame, like the 1500s, baby, I'm not picking it up. Okay, I'm not picking it up. I'm not doing it. But this book, to me, made me really, really enjoy passage of time through century, through century, through century, in these very layman terms. This is supposed to be written for children. I am a child. I'm just a little adult child. Based on this shirt, you would think that. It doesn't feel like it's teaching you, it's sharing with you, which I think is incredibly important. This changed the way that I look at history and made me want to read from periods that I wasn't previously interested in or hadn't been required learning. You know what I mean? I love history. This makes me want to flip through and be like, oh yeah, let's read about the emperors in the age of chivalry. I want to read about that now. Great book. Had fun with this. Love it, love it, love it a lot. The next couple of books are a very interesting topic, but something that I became very fascinated by and really almost obsessed with. And these are a couple of books about cults. For a little while, I was reading a lot of books about cults. I was reading cults under the banner of heaven, though that's not necessarily cults, but more of kind of fundamentalism. But the book that really stood out was Seductive Poison, and that is the story of Jonestown. Now, you're probably saying, okay, yeah, I mean, that'll definitely change the way you think about things. But for me, this book showed just how persuasive people can be when people, not even vulnerable, when people aren't even vulnerable, when people of very sound minds are able to be sucked into something and they don't even realize that it's happening. This is the first-hand account of the Jonestown Massacre. I should say more of like the Jim Jones cult. I forget the name of the cult exactly, but it's just kind of under Jim Jones' umbrella. If you don't know who Jim Jones is, he was a cult leader and he led this, don't drink the Kool-Aid, basically. If you want to find out exactly, look that up. But this is a woman's first-hand account of being involved with Jim Jones, and it's shocking just the extent and domineering force that people can become and how people become pressed under that leadership, I guess. And for me, the reason that this changed the way I think was because I definitely was in like an acting class that was a cult, and I think I'll talk about that maybe one day on my Patreon because it's a crazy story, and so it's a wild story that I don't think I want to air out here. Yeah, but it showed me that even if you are somebody who you don't think susceptible to being wrapped up in something like that, it can really happen to anybody. I think it's just very interesting to read those sorts of books anyway, because it shows you how everything just snowballs and you lose control and you don't know how you became a group as opposed to an individual, and how you lose that sight of yourself. All those books that I listed are very insightful, and they show you so much about cults and things like that. But I really am just completely astounded by just the manipulation that goes into it, and that really changed the way that I think about dynamics between people. It's fascinating, and I really loved it. So, guys, those are the books that changed the way I think, and the reasons that they changed the way that I think. So let me know, what are books that changed you? Books that you found were startling to your inner monologue, that just, oh, okay, well, now I'm thinking a little bit differently. These were all nonfiction, I realize right now. I can definitely make a fiction version of this list. There are fiction novels that have startled me and made me reevaluate what I appreciate in a novel. So let me know what you think. I would love to hear what books have changed your mind about certain things, certain ideas that you've had, certain anything. It could be anything. It could be about your stance on cults, like I did. Please check out Magic Mind. They've obviously changed my mind about a lot of things, and my ability to perform well has been strongly enhanced by them. So please give them a look. Check them out with the link in my bio on a WJ20. I think that's it. I think that is it. Anyway, I think you know what I have to say. You guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one. This is not as itchy as it looks. Don't worry. It's not as itchy as it looks. No, it's great. And it's vintage. Ooh!